Howdy folks, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating and often overlooked history of a truly transitional firearm, the Colt Model 1892 Army and Navy revolver. Now, I know what you're thinking. The title says 1891, and we'll get to that little quirk in a moment. This gun represents a pivotal moment in firearms technology, a bridge between the Old West and the modern era, so let's set the scene. It's the late 19th century. The US military is still armed with the legendary Colt single-action Army, the Peacemaker. It's a robust, reliable, and powerful revolver, chambered in .45 Colt. It tamed the frontier, and it served the Army well. But technology was marching on. The single-action design, where you have to manually cock the hammer for every shot, was starting to look a little, slow. Across the pond, European armies were adopting double-action revolvers, which allowed a soldier to fire simply by pulling the trigger. This was a huge tactical advantage. The U.S. Ordnance Department knew they needed to keep pace. They put out a call for a new, modern sidearm. Colt, being the industry giant it was, answered that call. They had been experimenting with double-action designs for years, but their early models, like the 1877 Lightning and 1878 Frontier, had their issues. They were a bit complex and sometimes mechanically fragile. For their new military pistol, they needed something rock-solid. Enter the Colt new Army and Navy. The development process led to the model adopted in 1892, but the trials and initial versions are often associated with the year 1891, hence the common reference. This revolver was a game-changer for Colt and the US military. Let's talk about what made it so different. First and foremost, the double-action, single-action trigger. You could still cock the hammer for a deliberate, accurate shot, or you could just pull the trigger for rapid fire. This was a massive leap forward in speed. Second, the cylinder. Unlike the single-action Army where you had to load and unload one cartridge at a time through a loading gate, the Model 1892 featured a swing-out cylinder. You push a latch, the cylinder swings out to the left, and you can eject all 6 spent casings at once with a push of the ejector rod. Then, you can quickly reload all 6 chambers. This was revolutionary for its time and is the standard for almost all modern revolvers. And third, the caliber. This is where things get really interesting and a little controversial. The Army decided to move away from the big, powerful .45 Colt cartridge. They wanted a more modern, smokeless powder round. The choice they landed on was the .38 long Colt. And third, the caliber. This is where things get really interesting and a little controversial. The Army decided to move away from the big, powerful .45 Colt cartridge. They wanted a more modern, smokeless powder round. The choice they landed on was the .38 long Colt. Now, the .38 long Colt was a smaller, lighter recoiling cartridge that fired a 150-grain lead bullet. The thinking was that its higher velocity would give it enough stopping power. It also meant soldiers could carry more ammunition for the same weight, and the lighter recoil made follow-up shots faster and more accurate. On paper, it seemed like a logical step forward, but this decision would have major consequences down the road. The U.S. Army officially adopted the Colt new Army revolver in 1892, and the Navy followed suit. Thousands of these guns were produced and issued to troops. They saw their first major combat test during the Spanish-American War in 1898. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. One of the most famous units to carry the new revolver was Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders, and it was in the jungles of Cuba and the Philippines during the subsequent Philippine-American War that the shortcomings of the .38 long Colt cartridge became tragically apparent. Reports started pouring in from the front lines. Soldiers were hitting their adversaries multiple times with the .38 caliber bullets, only to have them continue fighting. The round-nosed lead bullet just didn't have the energy transfer or stopping power needed to reliably neutralize a determined opponent, especially in the heat of close-quarters combat. This was a serious problem. When a soldier draws their sidearm, it's usually a last-ditch life-or-death situation. They need to have absolute confidence that their weapon will stop the threat, right now. That confidence in the .38 long Colt was eroding fast. The famous Thompson-Lagarde tests of 1904 were a direct result of these battlefield failures. The Army conducted extensive tests on animal and human cadavers to determine what the most effective handgun caliber was. Their conclusion was clear. Nothing less than a .45 caliber bullet was reliably effective for military service. This finding spelled the end for the Model 1892 and its .38 long Colt chambering as a primary military sidearm. The Army, in a bit of a scramble, started pulling old single-action Army revolvers in .45 Colt out of storage and reissuing them to troops in the Philippines. They even commissioned Colt to produce a new, stronger double-action revolver, the Model 1909, specifically chambered in a new .45 Colt cartridge. The experience with the .38 long Colt directly influenced the military's next search for a sidearm. It created a deep-seated belief in the effectiveness of a large-caliber bullet. This mindset paved the way for the adoption of one of the most iconic firearms ever made, the Colt Model 1911 pistol and its legendary .45 ACP cartridge. So, in a way, The failure of the 1892's cartridge led directly to the success of the 1911. But let's not write off the Model 1892 completely. It went through several upgrades during its service life. The Model 1894, 1896, 1901, and 1903, each with minor improvements to the lockwork and internal safety mechanisms. These revolvers served for years, and even after being replaced by the 1911, many remained in service as secondary weapons for a long time. On the civilian market, these revolvers were quite popular. They were sold under names like the New Army and New Navy, and were available in different barrel lengths and finishes. They were a reliable, well-made and modern double-action revolver from a trusted name. For a homeowner or someone just looking for a personal protection gun in the early 20th century, it was an excellent choice. Holding one today, you can really feel that history. The build quality is fantastic. The action on a well-maintained example is surprisingly smooth. The ergonomics feel a bit dated compared to modern designs. The grip is a little small for my hands, but you can understand why this was considered state-of-the-art. It points naturally, and the sights, while small by today's standards, are perfectly usable. It's a firearm that tells a complete story. It represents a bold step into the future with its double-action swing-out cylinder design, but it also serves as a crucial hard-won lesson in ballistics and the reality of combat. It's the gun that proved to the US military that while speed is important, power is essential. It walked so the M1911 could run dots, so while it may live in the shadow of the Peacemaker that came before it and the 1911 that came after, the Colt Model 1892 Army and Navy revolver is a hugely important piece of firearms history. It's a testament to innovation, a symbol of a transitional era, and a reminder that sometimes the most valuable lessons are the ones learned the hard way. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. I hope you found the story of this fascinating revolver as interesting as I do. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. Until next time, stay safe and keep history alive.